Alright, so you can see here the assignment for next week is up on the board. So you're going to be reading a sonnet by William Shakespeare, a pattern poem by George Herbert, and a poem in sort of regular rhyming stanza forms by Adrienne Rich. So we're going to be paying a lot of attention next time to the way a poem is put together. Right? We're going to be doing a formal examination of poetry. We're going to be looking at meter, we're going to be looking at rhyme, and I'm going to tell you how to do that today. Right? So we talked a little bit in general last time about how to read a poem, what to look for in a poem, how to get something out of it. I'm going to show you a different way to get something out of a poem today, which you're going to try on your own at home next time. Right, so Literary Reflection 1 is going to be due this Friday, right, so it's due tomorrow. Literary Reflections 2 and 3 will be due next week, right, get Literary Reflection 2 done by Wednesday, and 3 done by Friday. All right, does anybody have any questions about anything? No?
Which one are the ones for Wednesday and the next Friday? Which ones are they open?
You can write those on anything that we've looked at so far, right? So what I want you to do, if you're looking at the short stories, right, I want you to use one of those theoretical approaches I gave you. It doesn't have to be the one I assigned you, but just use one of those, like, the theory sheets are all up on GeorgiaView, and everybody has copies of them. So, use one of those to try to generate some kind of argument about the story, right? So you're going to try to come to some kind of thesis.
Do you want us to use a different one than we use for the lecture one?
Yeah, try on different ways of looking at these texts. And yeah, if you want to use these methods on the poems as well, right, you can do that. But I'm just trying to show you other ways of looking at a poem and get meaning out of it as well, right? So there are all kinds of different approaches we can take to come to different results when looking at a text. And I want you to try out different ways of looking at it. Any other questions? All right, then let's talk a little bit about what you're going to be looking for next time, right? So, two essential elements of, or things that we often consider essential elements of poetry, right, are meter and rhyme. Now, it is true that not all poetry rhymes, right? There's plenty of poetry in which there is no distinct rhyme scheme. However, when we talk about rhyme more generally, what we mean are concepts linked by repeated sounds. So you're not just going to look for straight up rhyme, right? Cat, bat, hat, rat. You're going to look for alliteration as well, right? Rat, wrong, rug, red, right? You're going to look for half rhymes, rider, reader, swan, stone, right? And all of these different kinds of repeated sounds are going to suggest different things to you, right? They're all meant to indicate different sorts of things, right? So there are two basic kinds of true rhyme, right? A true rhyme is an actual legitimate rhyme, right? Flying, dying. Right? The words actually echo each other. Dog, log. A masculine rhyme is a rhyme that ends on a single stressed syllable. So, I went outside to chase my dog. I found her sitting on a log, right? So, a single syllable that you say forcefully, right? Does everybody get, by the way, the difference between a stressed and an unstressed syllable? That might actually be a better place to start. When I talk about a stressed syllable, what do I mean?
The vowel.
No, it's not the vowel that we're talking about. Okay, so if I give you the phrase frying pan, what do we say more loudly? Fry or ing? Yeah, fry is the syllable that we pronounce more clearly, right? Frying. So our voice goes up when we say fry, down when we say ing, and up again when we say pan, right? So fry and pan are stressed syllables. Frying is an unstressed syllable, right? When you speak a word out loud, the syllables where your voice goes up, those are stressed. Where your voice goes down, those are unstressed. Right, so we use this kind of hash mark, this little accent mark over the syllable to mark that it's stressed, and to mark that it's unstressed, a little u. Right, so a poet will then usually kind of arrange these patterns of syllables to achieve particular effects in the poem. Right, so frying, right, it's two syllables, first stressed, second unstressed. It's an example of what's called a trochee, right? A trochee is an unstressed syllable, or a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. Now, if you have a 3-syllable unit, right, we call these units feet, right? We're dividing up a line of a poem based on these kinds of, units of stressed and unstressed. We call them feet. Now, if I have a stressed syllable followed by 2 unstressed syllables, we call that a dactyl. These words all come from Greek. These were units of line measurement that were used in Greek poetry, right? And you used different kinds of feet for different genres of poetry. Yeah.
Okay, so what are feet again?
Okay, so feet are units of 2 or 3 syllables,
Okay.
depending on how long the line is, right? So if you've got an even number of syllables in the line, then it's probably going to be a 2-syllable foot, right? If you've got an odd number of syllables in the line, it's usually going to be a 3-syllable foot. So you want to count up the syllables in the line before you start
And then
trying
all
to split it
together
up
they
into
make the feet?
What's that?
And then all together they make the feet. But each part is a foot.
Yeah, each unit of 2 or 3 syllables is going to be a foot, right?
Okay.
So if frying pan were in a particular, we're in a 10-syllable line in a poem, right?
Okay.
Frying would be 1 foot, and pan plus whatever followed it would be the foot that followed, right?
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay. Right. So these are examples of what's called falling meter. Because your voice goes down as you speak the line, right? You go up, and then it goes down. And it ends on a down note, right? It ends on an unstressed syllable. So these feet tended to be used by the Greeks for tragedy and epic, for things that were serious. Now, you also have what we call rising meter. Right? An I am is an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. So let me see if I can think of an example of an I am. Give me a minute. Today, right? Today would be a word that would be iambic, right? Start with an unstressed syllable, finish with a stressed syllable. And the 3-syllable equivalent is called an anapest, right? 2 unstressed syllables followed by a stressed. Now, these are called rising meter. Because you're building up to the stressed syllable at the end of the line, right? Your voices go, goes down and then up, down and then up, down and then up, and you end on a stronger note, right? Does this make sense, everybody, so far? Okay, there are also 2 kinds of sort of special feet. The first is called a spondee, and this is 2 stressed syllables that follow each other. Right, 2 stressed syllables in a single foot. The second is called a pyrrhic, and that's 2 unstressed syllables in a single foot. Now, the big thing that you're going to want to worry about as far as meter is concerned, right? It's good if you can divide things up into feet and determine which kind of feet you're working with, because this will tell you something about the general tone that the poet is trying to achieve, right? Is the poet going for a more positive or forceful tone, rising meter, or is the poet going for a more sort of pensive, quiet, or melancholy tone, right? Then they'll probably use falling meter. Stressed syllables tend to slow a line down. Unstressed syllables tend to speed a line up. So the more unstressed syllables are in a line, right, the faster it's going to go. The more stressed syllables are, the more slowly it's going to go, right? So in order to find these, in order to figure these out, and I really do want you to try to do this with these poems over the weekend, right? You're going to have to, get over any embarrassment you have over reading them out loud, right? You have to just speak the poem out loud and figure, okay, what do I say more forcefully? What do I say less forcefully? And mark the stress patterns. Try to do this especially with the Shakespeare poem. Yeah, Alan.
Okay, so with these, so is that just for like general poems, or is it just for these specific types that you could use this technique in order to figure out if they're trying to make a certain tone?
Poets do this kind of thing all the time. So it's not just with these specific poems. Now I've chosen these specific poems because their rhyme and meter are fairly regular. So it's relatively easy to do with these poems. But yeah, you can do this with any poem. It's much more intentional in certain eras, right? So if you're looking at like 16th through 19th century poetry, in which a lot of poets were more consciously trying to imitate Greek and Roman models, what this is built on, it's going to be a lot more pronounced. But poets still do this, and even if you can't organize a line into recognizable feet, it's still a good idea to go through and mark the stressed and unstressed syllables, because that will at least tell you which things are being emphasized in each line, right? And it'll still show you like where the poet is trying to speed things up and where the poet is trying to slow things down, right?
I was just wondering if this was like a technique you could, because I mean, I know for me especially is that there's a lot of different poems or writings that I read, and sometimes they get the tone like totally messed up. Or I get it, or maybe like I thought it was a passive, but it ended up it was a more aggressive tone. I just didn't catch on. I was wondering if this is like a technique you could just use to try and figure that out.
Well, and some, I mean, so, yeah, that this is exactly, it's something you can use to pull out things that are sort of left unstated in the poem. For example, the Shakespeare poem, you're going to see that, on the level of language says one thing, but when you look at the meter and the rhyme scheme, it's actually subtly undermining the thing that it pretends to be saying. Right, so sometimes the message you get from the meter and from the rhyme scheme is going to support what the poem says on its surface, but in more interesting poems, and usually, frankly, better poems, it actually undercuts it in some way and makes you see the language in a different or more ironic way. So yeah, you should try to do this with any poem that you read, right? Try to break down the syllables, see what's stressed, what's unstressed. See what you're supposed to read fast, or you're supposed to read slow, right? If something is stressed, this is generally an indication that the poet wants you to stop here and pay attention to this. If something is unstressed, the poet is encouraging you to just kind of glide over it. So usually monosyllabic nouns and verbs, right? Often pronouns, or things that actually refer to an action or a person or a thing, will be stressed. Monosyllabic connecting words, and, but, to, conjunctions and prepositions are usually going to be unstressed. You're just going to sort of glide over those. But you're definitely going to want to pay attention to places where the poet clusters a lot of stressed syllables because they're deliberately trying to slow you down there, or where they cluster a lot of unstressed syllables because they're deliberately trying to get you to read past that. All right, everything makes sense to everybody so far? Okay, now, we measure a line of poetry not based on the number of syllables in the line, but on the number of feet in the line. So, you will have a line of tetrameter, pentameter, hexameter. You'll rarely encounter lines that have fewer than 4 feet or more than 6 feet. Now, if you are reading a poem that is written in dactylic hexameter, how many syllables is each line going to have? Hex is 6, right? How many syllables are in a dactyl? 3. So, a line of dactylic hexameter will have how many syllables?
6.
This is the number of feet, not the number of syllables, right? So hexameter 6 refers to the number of dactyls that are going to be in that line. So how many syllables will that be?
That's 6 times 3.
Exactly, yeah. So it'll be,
All right.
a line of dactylic hexameter will be 18 syllables, right? If you're reading iambic pentameter, how many syllables will that be per line?
15.
Basic math, people.
I'll keep up.
10, exactly, yeah. It'll be iambic pentameter will be 10 syllables, right? So remember, right, the number here refers to the number of feet, not the number of syllables, right? Iambic pentameter is 10 syllables, dactylic hexameter is 18 syllables. Okay, right, so I think that is most of what we want to say about meter. So let's get back to what I was saying earlier about rhyme and how to read for rhyme. Okay, so a masculine rhyme is, a single stressed syllable at the end of the line. Right, so, as I said, something like, dog, log. A feminine rhyme is essentially a trochee at the end of the line. What's a trochee look like? Can somebody remind me what that pattern is?
It's a stressed and unstressed.
Right, stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable, right? So a feminine rhyme starts on a stressed, it's always 2 syllables, and it starts on a stressed syllable and ends on an unstressed syllable, right? So if you're reading a line, or a poem that they rhyme, say, flying and crying, that would be a feminine rhyme. Now the difference here, right, is what does a stressed syllable do to the way you read the line? What is a stressed syllable supposed to make you do?
Slow down.
Slow down, right? A stressed syllable is supposed to make you slow down. So a masculine rhyme tends to stop you forcefully at the end of the line, right? A feminine rhyme, which ends on an unstressed syllable, on the other hand, encourages you to do what?
Like masculine line slows you down?
Masculine rhyme slows you down, right? Yep, ends on a stressed syllable. Okay, so stop at the end of the line, pay attention to this.
Okay.
If we end the line on an unstressed syllable, though, what does that encourage you to do?
Then we do speed through it.
Yeah, speed on down to the next line, right? So feminine rhymes leave the end of the line a bit more open, right? They leave the end of the line, like the idea that you're dealing with the end of the line is then going to be continued in the next line, right? It's going to spill over. A masculine rhyme tends to shut down the idea at the end of the line. Right, this will make more sense as we look at examples next time, right? These are just things I want you to try to look for. All right, so when we're looking at true rhymes, right, words aren't rhymed arbitrarily or just because they sound nice together, right? Rhyme is usually intended to connect concepts, right? If there are 2 words in the poem that rhyme, you're supposed to be thinking of these words together in some way, right? You're supposed to be putting these ideas together. If you've got a true rhyme, then yeah, these ideas are supposed to be kind of congruent with each other in some specific way, right? You can lay one over the top of the other and they're going to fit together nicely, and yay, that's great. Good for us. But much of the rhyme you're going to see, especially in English language poetry, because it's actually really hard to rhyme in English compared to a lot of other languages, right? You see a lot more rhyme in Romance languages like French, Italian, Spanish, because they have very regular word endings for nouns and verbs, adverbs, what have you. And so it's very easy to rhyme. In English and other Germanic languages, we don't have that. So in order to get a rhyme, you sometimes have to wrench words in bizarre ways, or sort of try to wrench rhyme in bizarre ways, so force things to rhyme that don't. So there are a couple of different kinds of what we call slant rhyme. In fact, the earliest English language poetry doesn't use rhyme at all. Do you guys remember that example I showed you last time, Caedmon's hymn? Yeah, Anglo-Saxon poetry does not rhyme. It's virtually impossible to rhyme in Old English. So what they did instead was they used alliteration to connect ideas. You'd have 3 syllables in a line that would alliterate with each other. So slant rhyme, there are 3 specific types, right? The first is consonants. Consonants is a rhyme that is based solely on shared consonant sounds. And it's used to indicate a surface similarity that falls apart when you go a little deeper. So, for example, in a poem by W.H. Auden, he rhymes the words rider and reader. Right, to indicate that while the reader might be sharing in the adventures of the rider he's reading about, right, he's only doing so vicariously. The rider's the one taking all of the real risks, while the reader sits at home safely. The second kind of slant rhyme is called assonance. And this is a rhyme that is based on a shared vowel sound. So, typically, this will indicate a sort of hidden or internal similarity between the two things you're rhyming, right? Something that's not obvious on the surface. So if I were to rhyme, say, let me think about this. Cat and bad, right? This is a rhyme that is based solely on an internal vowel sound, right? That's an assonance rhyme. If I were to rhyme, say, what was the one? I just had one. Red and beg, right? That internal E sound is the same. Right, so assonance is a repeated vowel sound.
Can you have more than one of these in a poem?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know if it was like strictly like this poem and it's just this.
No, yeah, you'll find these all over the place. Now, the other thing you're going to want to look for, the third type of slant rhyme, which is really quite common, and also the trickiest. This is actually one of the main reasons you're going to want to read things out loud, is to find this particular kind of rhyme. This is what we call an I rhyme. I rhyme refers to words that look like they should rhyme with each other, but don't when you actually speak them out loud. Right? So they rhyme on the page, but when you actually verbalize them, when you actually vocalize them, they end up not rhyming. So I'll give you an example of this. There's a poem by Christopher Marlowe called "The Passionate Shepherd to His Love." Did any of you're familiar with it? Any of you had to read that in high school? Maybe a couple of you did. Maybe you've forgotten it. Right, but the first two lines of that poem are, "Come live with me and be my love, and we shall all our pleasures prove." Right? So love and prove look like they're supposed to be a true rhyme, right? But when you actually speak them, they don't sound alike. And what I rhyme usually indicates is that the poet is trying to play a trick on you, right? Usually when you see I rhyme, the poet is being less than serious or is actively lying, right? Is actively saying something, is like indicating to you, hey, I don't really mean this, right? I'm going to pretend I do. I'm going to pretend this is serious, this is important, but it's all bullshit. And right, the point in this particular poem, right, is that the passionate shepherd is really a sophisticated urban poet, right, writing a poem to woo a city girl, not a shepherd sporting about in the meadow with sheep and nymphs and people playing wooden flutes and all that fun things, all those fun things that 16th century shepherds did, apparently. But yeah, I-rhyme is something that you're definitely going to want to keep an eye out for, because this is always an indicator that the poet is playing a little game with you. And I mean, look, the thing is, like, writing poetry is in a lot of ways like playing a game or solving a puzzle. Like, a good poem is really a complex verbal puzzle, and it's made up of these various parts. And if you can pick these pieces apart and see how they fit together, then you'll be getting a lot more out of the poem than you will if you're just doing a surface reading. All right, does anybody have any questions about any of this? So I want you to try this with these 3 poems for next time, right? I want you to just do your best, right? See if you can break down the meter. See if you can break it down into feet if you can. At the very least, try to demonstrate where the stressed and unstressed syllables are. Break down the rhyme schemes, right? They all have very regular rhyme schemes. And try to find these little places where the poet seems to be messing with you a little bit, all right? So that's what we're going to be doing for next time. All right, so for today, right, I asked you to look at 3 poems and tell me a little bit about what you could determine about the speaker in each poem. All right, so let's start with the Bruce Springsteen song on page 489. So what did you get out of this? Who's the speaker? Who's talking? What's that? Okay. A man. Okay, male speaker.
I had said maybe,
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. What do you think?
maybe sort of like maybe a redneck or a hunter.
Okay. What made you think What made you think redneck?
I guess I was too wrong. I guess just thinking about like the sawed off, gun or.
Okay. This is a guy who a guy who owns a sawed-off shotgun, right?
Right.
Okay.
And, just kind of riding around, with weapon, I don't know.
Yeah, just a guy riding around with a gun in his lap.
And he seems
apparently
kind
nothing
of
else to
carefree.
do.
I guess you could say carefree, like nothing matters, or he's kind
Okay.
of nonchalant about.
Yeah, he does seem to have a fairly casual attitude towards what he's been doing, right? Is there anything else that suggests sort of redneck or rural to you, like just maybe like even like on the level of language?
Nebraska country.
What's that?
Nebraska country.
No, it's
Nebraska's a state, yeah. Nebraska's a state. Yeah, it's in the Midwest.
Yeah. It's the state.
It's like
It's the state country.
a sawed-off 14 and without.
Pardon? Yeah, he's got the sawed-off 410 in his lap, yeah.
Well, it says sir.
That brings like
Yeah.
a cowboy, old western to my mind.
Okay, like a kind of cowboy kind of thing. Okay, yeah, the guy's, yeah, he's driving around Nebraska, like he's out west, right? He's driving around Nebraska and the Badlands of Wyoming, right? Yeah, all these kind of, old western settings. Good.
You said the word sir, which usually Southerners use as respect.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, the word sir,
So basically, the mannerisms are just more traditional.
yeah. So traditional and like traditional rural, right?
No one says prison storeroom.
No one says what?
Prison storeroom.
Prison storeroom? Yeah.
And plus, he was like with leather structure. Wait, is that a literature?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
When I read across it, I thought he was like, since I'm thinking Western, he had like a they're like, vest type thing.
No, he
Pull his
yeah.
head back, you know, they have to pull their head
But when I
back.
read it again, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, no, he what's the situation being described here?
He's been put on the death penalty.
Yeah, this guy's on death row, right?
Yeah, you can tell, but they don't use the children today.
Pardon?
They don't no longer use the children today.
No, they don't use, yeah, I think it's, in states where the death penalty is still enforced, it's mostly lethal injection these days. But even like in those states, there's now a moratorium in a lot of states because it turns out that the lethal injection drugs do some nasty things they didn't realize they did. So, yeah.
Well, he's kind of admitting that he did do something bad.
Yeah, well, is he admitting to something non-specific here?
Well, he suggested he killed someone.
I mean, he comes out and says it, right? In the first stanza, right? I saw her standing on her front lawn, just twirling her baton. Me and her went for a ride, sir, and 10 innocent people died.
Oh, I thought he killed her.
And then see, I was watching the Sun Show on Netflix yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like an undercover cop, whatever.
Uh-huh.
So he was working with Hell Angels.
Uh-huh.
So that kind of got in my head too, because when he infiltrated the Hell Angels, they went for a ride, and he ended up supposed to kill I forgot what they call it, a mumble or rival gang,
Yeah, yeah.
and he had to show evidence. So they kind of, he said went for a ride, 10 innocent people died.
Mm-hmm.
It made me think about that.
Yeah.
Rival gang.
Mm-hmm. But does this guy seem to be a part of a gang?
No.
Not.
Yeah, now, there's only one other person with him when he does these things, right? Just this girl. And I think it would actually sort of behoove us. So we've got the basic characteristics of the speaker down here. But by the way, he's on death row. Where is it and who's he talking to?
Oh,
He's talking to the sheriff, yeah.
oh.
The sir he's speaking to, yeah, is the sheriff. And he's, I guess, giving his, last confession and testament, right? But let's sort of like look at where the poem starts, right? Or where the song starts. I saw her standing on her front lawn, just twirling her baton. Me and her went for a ride, sir, and 10 innocent people died. So what's the first image that we get in those first two lines?
People died. And,
First two lines.
him
Girl
with the
twirling her
girl.
baton.
Yeah, a girl twirling a baton, right? So it's a girl twirling a baton. Is this an activity we usually associate with adult women?
Is baton code for something else?
His daughter, his niece or something.
Well, we'll get to that. Let's just stick with the baton twirling image for now. But yeah, this is an image we usually associate with teenage or middle school girls, right? Baton twirling is a school activity, right? So yeah, so the girl with it's supposed to indicate youth and innocence, and the fact that she's doing this on her front lawn indicates what kind of setting, right? Where do people usually have big enough front lawns to wander around twirling batons?
In the country.
Mm. Well, is your front lawn, is the lawn as clearly defined in a country, in a rural area?
No.
No. You tend to have clearly defined clipped lawns where people might actually drive by and see you in a suburb, right? Yeah, so we're looking here at a kind of suburban environment. Right. This young, innocent girl twirling a baton on her front lawn in, her safe, boring suburb. And along comes Mr. 410 here. Picks her up, right? Me and her went for a ride, sir, and 10 innocent people died. So he doesn't directly say here that they killed these people, right? But what about the fact that he says 10 innocent people died?
That he knew what he was doing was wrong.
What's that?
He knew what he was doing was wrong because he said innocent people.
Yeah, are these, if he specifically says innocent people, right? Are these people he had any beef with?
No.
No.
Are these people who've done anything to him? No, yeah, Chase.
Wait, did he kidnap her?
That's not specified, is it? Whether she's there with him willingly or not, right?
Yeah. And 10 innocent people died, like, their family was like mourning for her, like, they was worried about her. They died inside.
I think you're maybe getting a little bit more metaphorical than the poem can support. But yeah, but yeah, like the admission of the 10 innocent people died, right?
Yeah.
Is like that, you know, essentially we just went out and killed random folks, right? We just went out and killed 10 people. We didn't know them, had no problem with them, but we killed them anyway. From the town of Lincoln, Nebraska, with a sawed-off 410 on my lap, through the badlands of Wyoming, I killed everything in my path. Now, I think also, sir, here, notice where he keeps the gun. This sort of, I think, gets at what you were getting at about the baton, maybe also meaning something else, right? Where does he keep the gun? On his lap, right? Yes. So the gun is a kind of phallic symbol here, right? Right. The gun is also a kind of stand-in for male genitalia, right? The gun sitting on his lap, right? Very, very specifically positioned. So what does this suggest about why this guy kills?
Oh, that's his masculinity.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. It has to do with his masculinity, right? Yeah, certainly it has to do like, you know, masculine power, but he brings the girl along too, right? So what's the real reason this guy kills?
To impress her.
Maybe to impress her, yeah. But what feeling is he hoping to get out of both the girl twirling the baton, which is also a phallic symbol, and killing people?
Maybe to protect.
What are these? What two ideas is this guy conflating here? What two ideas are mixed up in his mind?
He's innocent.
He has no compunctions about admitting any of this, right? About guilt. Well, I think if we look a little further on, right, Sheriff, when the man pulls that switch, sir, and snaps my poor head back, you make sure my pretty baby is sitting right there on my lap. Who's the pretty baby?
14.
Yeah, the gun.
It could be the 410 and it could be the girl, right? It could be both.
Why would you give him a gun?
What's that?
Why would you give him a gun in a chair?
Well, he wouldn't, right? But he's saying that, you know, if he had to set up his ideal death situation,
Why you
right?
want that little girl in the
What's that?
But maybe not the girl, maybe the gun.
I praise the gun, because why would you want that little girl in the gun?
Yeah, well, okay. Would a normal person drive from Nebraska and Wyoming shooting everyone in his path?
I think this is the psychopath in general. I don't think.
Yeah, the guy's got issues, right? And one of these issues, right, is like that he mixes up the girl and the gun, right? Because he's mixed up violence with sexual pleasure,
Oh.
right? He brings the two together in his brain, right? Even, you know, baton and gun share at least this end consonant sound, right? Right? Baton and gun are a kind of pseudo rhyme. This guy is, this guy is mixing these two things up.
What happened to the girl?
What did it say?
That's why I said I think that it killed her.
Do we have enough evidence from what's in the poem to say what happened to the girl? The girl's not here now, right? Whatever happened to the girl, she is not sitting in the room with the guy at this moment. So, did he kill her? Who knows? Is she in jail? Who knows? Did she just go back to her family crying? Who knows? Right? We don't get that. But I think if we look at the final stanza here, right? They declared me unfit to live, said into that great void my soul be hurled. They wanted to know why I did what I did. Well, sir, I guess there's just a meanness in this world. Now, does that line sound familiar to anybody at all?
Yeah.
That's the misfit, right? That's the misfit, and the good man is hard to find.
I seen that at the bottom of the other page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the footnote talks about it, it mentions it as well, right? But yeah, that's... Now, when the misfit was talking about meanness and the meanness in the world, right? What did he associate with meanness? What was the point to him of meanness?
Himself.
Let's look back.
Or the grandmother.
Where is... Oh yeah, actually, yeah. 425. Right? Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead, the misfit continued, and he shouldn't have done it. He's thrown everything off balance. If he did what he said, then it's nothing for you to do but throw away everything and follow him. And if he didn't, then it's nothing for you to do but enjoy the few minutes you got left the best way you can, by killing somebody or burning down his house or doing some other meanness to him. No pleasure but meanness, he said, and his voice had become a snarl. So what does the misfit associate with meanness?
Violence.
Okay, meanness is doing violence into others for no reason, right? But what's the thing that he gets from meanness? Pleasure,
Yeah.
yes, right? And that's essentially like what this guy is admitting here at the end of the poem, right? Is that he killed these people because it gave him pleasure, right? That's the point of the Flannery O'Connor illusion here, right? I killed these people because I enjoyed it. I killed these people because that's how I get my jollies. Right? So we have in this book a portrait of a remorseless serial killer, right? Who kills for some kind of sexual satisfaction. Now I'd like to move on to the E.E. Cummings poem that I gave you. And where?
520.
520, thank you. Went right past it, yes. And this will be more effective if I can get a volunteer to try to read this and sort of throw some real rhetorical flourish into it. So anybody want to do that? Any volunteer to read it?
I can read it.
All right, go for it, Brian, read it.
Read it, rhetorical flourish.
Yes, give it rhetorical flourish.
Next to, of course, God, America, I love you, land of the pilgrims, and so forth. Oh, so can you see by the dawns early in my country, tis of centuries come and go, and are no more what of it we should worry. In every language, even deaf and dumb, thy sons acclaim your glorious name by glory, by jingo, by G, by gosh, by gone. Why talk of beauty? What could be more beautiful than those heroic happy dead who rushed like lions to the sword slaughter? They did not stop to think, they died instead. Then shall the voice of liberty be mute? He spoke and drank directly a glass of water.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian.
Let's
Yeah, it's pretty clear. At the very least, the first half of this poem makes absolutely no sense, right? Or at least there's no clear logic to. There is actually a logic to what the guy is saying, but it's not immediately obvious, right? Next to, of course, God, America, I love you, land of the pilgrims, and so forth. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early, my country, 'tis of centuries come and go. What is he doing here? Where do these words come from? Yeah, national, from patriotic songs, right? So he's quoting little snippets of patriotic songs, but never finishing them, right? All right, so, right, we'll start with that.
Does it do that to mock it?
I don't know if it's probably not fair to say that it's the poet. I don't think the poet is actually mocking the songs themselves, but I think there is a level of irony attached to the speaker here, right? So what do we notice about, what's the very first thing we see on that first line? What's the first thing we notice before the speaker even starts talking?
quote.
Yeah, quotes, right? So this is quoted speech, right? So this is represented to us as the speaker in the poem listening and reporting the speech of someone else, right? So what kind of people pepper their talk with quotes from patriotic songs?
Politicians.
Politicians, yeah. It's, I keep thinking of, there's a really, really awkward and painful piece of video from the 2012 electoral cycle where Mitt Romney is singing every verse of America the Beautiful to a group of unresponsive old people in Florida. It's both it's hilarious and hilarious and kind of make you squirm in your seat kind of way. But yeah, he's doing that to sort of prove his patriotic bona fides, right? I know all the lyrics to this famous patriotic song. So this guy's giving us little snippets of patriotic song. What else do we notice about the line structure here? Are any of these lines complete thoughts? It's one long run-on thought, although it does change about halfway through, right? But he breaks the lines in the middle of sentences, right? Next to, of course, God, America, I love you, land of the pilgrims, and so forth. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early, my country, 'tis of thee, right? This is a technique that's called enchantment. Right. Breaking the line in the middle of a thought, in the middle of a sentence. And it usually indicates a disordered or broken thought process. It can also be like an eye rhyme, right? An attempt to disorient the reader, right? An attempt to confuse the reader by denying you the kind of standard structure that you expect from language that's actually trying to communicate something. Okay, so What of it? We should worry in every language, even deaf and dumb. Thy sons acclaim your glorious name, by gory, by jingo, by gee, by gosh, by gum. So he descends from unfinished song lyrics, right, into actual nonsense.
You're saying politics are nonsense?
Well, we're only about halfway through the poem, right? So he starts with these patriotic sonnets to prove his patriotic bona fides, then some genial nonsense, and then, why talk of beauty? What could be more beautiful than these heroic happy dead who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter? They did not stop to think, they died instead. Then shall the voice of liberty be mute? Do we notice a difference between these lines and the rest of the poem? Has something changed here?
The tone?
The tone has changed a lot, right? What does it suddenly become?
Condescending?
Yeah, it's pretty condescending throughout, right? Does the speaker seem to have much respect for his audience?
No.
Right? It's like, these are people I can wow with a couple of references to America the Beautiful, right? I don't have to work very hard here.
You ever seen the video of Alexander the Great? Wait, Alexander Hamilton? Something like that? Who was rapping on stage in the White House?
Are you you're talking about like a clip from the musical?
In the White House?
I haven't seen it. I actually have tickets to go see it Memorial Day weekend in Atlanta, but I haven't seen it yet.
It's on YouTube. It was a dude. He was rapping about stuff like that.
Yeah, it's him.
I think it's Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah. So was it Lin-Manuel Miranda playing Alexander Hamilton, or was it somebody else?
Oh, I know what he's talking. It was like a parody song thing.
Okay. Yeah.
They're making
yeah.
reference to the play. And
Okay, right. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I was getting because the play is so popular. That was what I thought you were talking about. Okay. Yeah. No. I actually haven't seen that. But yeah. This is it's an imitation of political language. But the guy suddenly shifts to a serious subject, right? And what is the serious subject he's talking about? What does this tell us about what he's actually doing and like what the actual occasion is?
It says like, who rush like lions to the roaring slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
so they're trying to
Is
like
it the
recruit.
election?
Well, what could be more beautiful than these heroic happy dead who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter? They did not stop to think, they died instead. Then shall the voice of liberty be mute. What's he talking about? Who are these heroic happy dead?
Military brigades.
Yeah, they're soldiers, right?
Yeah, soldiers.
He's talking about soldiers who've been killed in war. So the occasion, or the actual situation, right, what this guy is here to talk about is to memorialize soldiers killed in war. And what does this mean to him?
Personally.
Or yeah, what does it seem to mean to him? How does he present this?
You're not treated fairly.
Does he seem to think the soldiers were not treated fairly?
It sounds like he's saying that they just rushed to their deaths.
Like,
But does he think that's a bad thing?
Yeah.
Does the speaker, does the politician speaking think that's a bad thing? What could be more beautiful than these heroic happy dead who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter? They did not stop to think, they died instead.
Good job of dying young. Okay.
What is this?
Yeah, this to him,
It's crazy. It's insanity.
What does it mean sarcastic though?
Yeah, because you would think putting something like beautiful and then initiating, oh, they went and died to the slaughter.
Like,
that would be like
beautiful.
sarcastically done.
Yeah.
What's more beautiful?
It was like great.
well, yeah. The guy is sort of praising the beauty of death and war, right, for a just cause. Now, if we look at the date when this was written, right, context might help us a
Tell me
little
it's
bit.
Vietnam.
1926.
I don't know.
What's the most recent big conflict the U.S. would have been involved in 1926?
Korea? Or is it World War I?
World War I.
Okay.
Yes.
That was Korea. Like
So this is this is about 8 years after World War I, and Cummings had actually fought in the First World War. Now, does anybody know how World War I was different from previous wars?
trenches, mustard gas, and waiting.
Yeah,
It involved it.
yeah. It was the first war really to involve like mass mechanized death, right? The older way of going to war was, you had guys wearing different colored uniforms lined up in ranks facing each other, right, with muskets that were actually pretty inaccurate most of the time, right? They lined up on a battlefield, they fired each other for a while, there might be some sort of stabbing with bayonets, and then the side with fewer people runs away, the side that still has more people left stays, and they get to keep that spot. Yay, good for them. You did not yet have, prior to World War I, machine guns that could mow down whole ranks of soldiers, right? You did not have tanks that could roll over people and vehicles, right? You did not have poisonous gases that could just, kill anyone who breathed them in. World War I really sort of created a new way. It indicated a lot of all the different new ways we had found to murder each other, to murder as many of each other as possible, as quickly as possible. So yeah, the casualty rates were enormous, especially in Western Europe. The British and the French didn't recover for a generation. They lost almost a whole generation of young men. And so, like, the war that this guy is glorifying, right, these heroic happy dead, right, is also, to Cummings, who remembers it, a roaring slaughter. And to this politician, right, then shall the voice of liberty be mute, right? Does he think that this was all fought for a cause? Right. This is the preservation of liberty, right?
That ending was kind of confusing me. I was wondering, is he saying that running towards the slaughter is what makes liberty mute, or is it because they did this, it will not be mute?
Exactly, yeah. It's that kind of conventional idea, right, that, we go to war to protect our freedoms, right? And, bless you. And the poem, by making this politician so ridiculous, undercuts that idea, right? That war is something that is initiated by people who sit safely at home, spouting patriotic slogans, while other people go off and do the dying.
Yeah, because they're saying that they can go out and saying, you think it's all great until you actually realize what it is, and that's what he'd use the word mute as. So that's why.
Well, basically, that's just the whole, rich send the young and the poor to go die for their causes. I mean,
It's like, oh, what you're doing or what you think that they're doing is great, like being heroic and how beautiful death is. But with liberty and what you're trying to protect, you don't really know what's happening. And then the end of the line where he's like, I'm just going to sit in my home here.
Yeah. Then we go back outside, right? Back to the actual speaker of the poem who's observing this guy, right? He spoke and drank rapidly a glass of water. Now, remember what we said earlier about rhyme. What word is water rhymed with in the poem up above? Slaughter.
So this is saying, eat your own words.
Well, let's think about this. I mean, we've got who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter. He spoke and drank rapidly a glass of water. Now, one thing that's interesting to note here is that there's some distance in the poem between these rhymes, right? This isn't, two lines right together that rhyme. The line that this rhymes with is 3 lines up. So the water rhyme is at some remove from the slaughter rhyme, which indicates the speaker's distance from the slaughter he describes as he's sitting here rapidly drinking his water, right?
Why would he be rapidly drinking his water?
Well, it's just, when you speak a lot and you start to get dry mouth and
Yeah.
stuff, so you just lubricate.
I would think that he would indicate drinking like slowly, like, haha, prove my point. I'm just gonna drink my water slowly.
It's more like he's giving a really long speech and he's like, okay, I'm getting dry. Now let's keep going. The thing is that
Yeah.
he's going to keep going with his speech, not celebrating.
Yeah, because there are no pauses or stops in any of that, right? Any of that goes above. He's just going. Yeah, go ahead, Chase.
Wait, what you mean by the water and slaughter? So like, him drinking the water is like this distance, like from the.
No, but the fact that the 2 rhymes are so far apart in the poem, right? Instead of being close together. So instead of rhyming it with a word that's right up above it, right? Water is rhymed with a word that's 3 lines away from it.
Right.
So instead of coupling these words, right? They're pulled apart. We're still supposed to think of them together, but the fact that there's stuff in between them matters as well, right? That's some sort of padding between the politician sitting safely at home, giving shitty speeches, drinking his water, and the roaring slaughter. And I think like the rapidly drinking also reflects what happens in the slaughter line, right? Who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter. Now, are these men bravely and slowly marching off to glory?
No.
They're rushing in fast and getting mowed down, right? So the slaughter itself is, like a quick act of consumption, or like war devouring people.
There's no like eagerness type of thing?
Yeah, kind of eagerness for death,
Yeah.
right? And death's eagerness to suck them in. And he drinks the water in the same way, right? He consumes the water in the way the war consumes the heroic happy dead, right? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is like, reading poetry takes practice. There are subtleties to be found in fiction. As you pay more attention to detail, you pay more attention to language. And that was like one of the reasons one of the things you guys are actually doing really, really well last time when we were looking at A Good Man Is Hard to Find, right? You were stopping and lingering on passages that made you uncomfortable, that you maybe just sort of glossed over and moved on from before, right? But sitting and dwelling on those passages makes you think about them, right?
Yeah.
Makes you think of what they're doing there and what they tell you about this story. Poetry also needs to be read slowly and for weird little details, right? Weird little details are always meaningful, they're rarely accidental, and even when they are accidental, they're meaningful. So yeah, take it slow, pick out as many details as you can. For next time, right, again, try to figure out the stress patterns and rhyme schemes in these poems, and try to look for places where the poem is maybe using the rhyme scheme or the meter to say something that the words don't.
What if you read a poem and you think you know what it is, but then the author comes out and tells you that you're wrong?
The author's just another reader. The author can't tell you you're wrong.
I like that.
Now,
I like that. I
Now,
do too.
before we just descend into total chaos and relativism, and everything just means whatever the hell we want it to mean, right? Some readings are better than others. and you have to be able to find evidence to back it up, right? You can't just decide arbitrarily that something means what you want it to. Right, so you have to be able to provide some evidence to back it up. But yeah, as long as you can make a case for it,
And this is how
Like
people
with-
make a case for it.
Like with the.
this is one way you can make a case for it.
Like with the other poem with how I said the, like, baby could either be, or he said, like, the baby be the gun or the girl. It just.
Yeah, right, that level of ambiguity, right? It can be either or it can be both. And remember too, we said about, sort of good poetry last time, we looked at, those two examples, right? The poem that is regarded as the good poem is the one that is more ambiguous, right? That presents the image to you and lets you come to your own conclusions about it. Now, it sort of hints at what those conclusions should be,
Yeah.
but it doesn't tell you what you ought to think. All right, so that is it for today. Remember to get that first literary reflection in tomorrow by midnight. And yeah, we'll see you on Tuesday. Have a good
So
weekend.
for the literary reflection, I can choose like a poem with like Marxism.
Yeah, you can do it. You can try to do a Marxist reading of a poem. That might be more difficult
Well, I
because
just
there's
like-
no plot.
Yeah, I just feel like I read the method.
Yeah, yeah.